It's Josh with the Financial Advisor Car Guy. This week I wanted to talk about a prior project that I had a little more than a decade ago. I want to say it was 2007. I found a old FJ40 locally for sale, and it was a 1964. Now, I'm a little rusty on the years, but it was not until I want to say 66 or 67 that a large number of FJ40s came over from Japan and made their way to the States. In 1964, I want to say there was something like less than 200 FJ40s brought over. So it was a pretty rare thing to find, and the prior guy had used it as kind of his off-road toy. The top was in terrible condition. It was a hard top, but it was in terrible condition. He had put all aftermarket suspension on the truck and lifted it, put 35-inch tires under it, and had taken out the original Toyota motor, and it had a Chevy 350 in it with an automatic transmission. So it wasn't at all original. Quite honestly, what was left either needed to be replaced with something new or had already been replaced with something new in aftermarket. So I bought it, and at the time, I want to say I paid about $2,500. Now, just like every car that I've built, I do keep spreadsheets. Now, that spreadsheet is somewhere on an old computer or in a backup file someplace, and I couldn't find it for this particular video, but I really did want to talk about this vehicle. So I do have some pictures, as you can see. But more so than that, I thought I'd walk you through what it looked like to buy a car that had somewhat been modified, kind of try to restore it, and then obviously sell it for a profit was my end game. So FJ40s, if you were to shop for one today, you'd be very hard pressed to find one running and driving under $10,000. One priced less than 10 grand either needs everything, has a ton of rust, probably not running and driving. Anything 10 to 15 grand might still need paint, might still need interior, but it's running and driving and could be a driving project. And that's really ideal for a lot of folks. If you get into one that's been pretty nicely restored, right? It could be a novice restoration, it could be a real mild cosmetic restoration with maybe an engine rebuild or refresh. You're probably looking at $20,000 to $25,000. Frame off restoration rotisserie style, you're talking about a $50,000 rig. So FJ40s are really no joke in the off-roading world, but also in the restoration world. They're pretty easy to work on. They're Toyotas, so they run forever. They've got that reliability behind them, and parts are pretty readily available. It had, like I said, the Chevy 350 in it, which was probably out of an old pickup or something like that. It could have been out of a Camaro or something. So I don't know much about the history of the motor, but it was a carbureted motor, so it probably was from the 70s or early 80s. And like I said, this FJ really needed everything. So like I said, I bought it running and driving, brought it home, and really started diving in. First thing I did was remove the hardtop and disassemble it. It was, if you're familiar with them, all the weather stripping and gaskets and everything were completely rotted out. I don't know how the windows were staying in. It had the old fold-up door in the back, whereas most of them had barn doors. So again, a very early, 64. So that was a really early option. And then it had the iconic white roof, which was cracking in several places. It was in really terrible shape. And fortunately for me, I had a buddy who was pretty exceptional at fiberglass. And so he helped me fix that in time. But the hardtop was really the least of my worries. It did come with a bikini top, and it was summertime. So to me, I just wanted to run it and drive it and enjoy it, and didn't care so much about the hardtop at that point. So very first thing I did was rip out all the interior. It had two kind of nasty bucket seats that were not original. Again, probably out of some Jeep or some aftermarket type of seating accessory catalog, and took those out and threw them away. They weren't salvageable, they smelled, they were molding in a couple of spots, the brackets were kind of busted. And so very first thing I did, I ripped that out, and it didn't have a back seat or anything. So I did go ahead and pull the roll bar off and sanded the entire inside. There was a little bit of surface rust, so I used a grinding wheel and kind of brushed all that stuff out and cleaned it up. I treated it with a rust-stop Rust-Oleum so that it wouldn't come back, and then bedlined the entire interior. I never intended to put carpet in there, although they do sell carpet kits. So I wanted to keep it real nice and off-roady, rugged, and didn't do the carpet thing. I did find an aftermarket Jeep bolt-in back seat, and it was one of those, I want to say they call it a tumble and fold or a roll and tumble or something like that, where the back seat folds flat and then flips forward. So you've got more or less a nice trunk space in the back. But I wanted a back seat because of my kids and things like that. Now, when I bought this FJ40, we were pregnant with my daughter, so I didn't have any kids yet. But it was really important to me that when she came along, I'd be able to put a car seat into this FJ. So once the back seat was figured out and measured and cut and put in and everything was good there, I bought a neoprene fitted seat cover. So it was black and looked good, it was waterproof, ready to go. Then I went online, I want to say through eBay or one of those online sites, and did find some really nice bucket racing style seats. And a buddy of mine had a track car that he was parting out. So he gave me like a steering wheel hub and some Corbeau racing seat belts and a few other odds and ends, but for the most part, those racing buckets, I had to fabricate some seat mounting brackets. So sure enough, I went down to Home Depot and bought all the angle iron and all the flat iron I needed and cut it all up and spot welded and things like that, and put together these seat brackets and bolted these Corbeau style racing seats on there with the seat belts and everything fastened, and went together like a glove. It was really awesome. It was fantastic. So I did the driver and the passenger seat. Now, that particular vehicle had a fuel tank under the passenger seat, and I'm not sure at what point, but someone somewhere replaced that factory fuel tank with an aftermarket one and put it in the back underneath the bed, if you will, but underneath where the back seat was. So that was a little tricky to put in the back seat when I had to drill through the floor and not hit that gas tank. It did leave a ton of space under that passenger seat, but when I had the seat out and was, again, cleaning and fabricating the seat brackets, I went ahead and ordered a stock factory tank and put it back in that location. My thoughts were, I'd love to have dual tanks. And so that was that. It was really a fantastic deal. It extended the range of that vehicle more than double. I think they were a 15 gallon, and then the one underneath the back was only like a 12 or 13 gallon. So like I said, I was able to double my distance driving. It was just great if you're going out in the country. Once I had all that dialed in and bedlined and ready to go, then it was time to work on the dash. And so what I ended up doing was finding an outfit online. It was an FJ40 restoration website where I was able to get a beautiful vintage looking Grant wooden steering wheel. And it was a little smaller than your normal, 14 or 15 inch wheel. I want to say it was 13 and a half, with the steering wheel hub and everything. And the dash had, at one point or another, had all sorts of dials and gauges and things like that that were aftermarket, that the previous owner had cut holes in the dash and put their gauges in, or fog light switches, or running light switches, or whatever those may be. So my fiberglassing friend came over, and what we ended up doing was cleaning the entire dash. We covered every hole from the backside, and then body filled over the front, sanded everything smooth, bedlined the dash. It was completely clean. There was nothing in it. It was fantastic. And then I found a billet cutout gauge cluster that had holes for all my gauges. So it fit the factory mounting place. And I was able to order online again some gauges, really fancy gauges that looked nice. They were era correct, but aftermarket, new and fresh, and worked. So I was able to assemble that deal, put it all in the dash, and then a matching billet glove box door. So again, the dash looks super, super clean. Once that was all assembled and put back together, I did re-drill some holes in the dash for lighting, for all that stuff. I needed a headlight switch. I needed a I can't even think of what it was, but there were 4 or 5 switches on my dash. And again, very cleanly installed, and everything was really, really nice. The hardest part of that restoration wasn't any of that stuff. It was actually running a new wiring harness. I found online again an aftermarket harness to rewire the entire vehicle. Now, with it having the Chevy 350 and not the Toyota Inline 6 that it came with, I had to make some adaptations to that wiring harness to make the new system work. It wasn't as easy as I'd like to think it was. Thinking back, I probably lost a ton of sleep trying to figure that thing out. It was really challenging. But ultimately did get it working, got all the wires run, nice and clean and tight, and I could pull the wires so that they were very taut, and then cut them where I needed, splice them, and everything was done very, very cleanly inside the cab. Now, once you were on the engine side, right, the hoods popped. It was kind of a wiring mess, and ultimately that did get cleaned up. I did use some wire loom to have it all clean when the hood was popped, but there were a lot of extra wires that were not necessary but might be down the line, so I kind of left them all in the harness. And then I had the option of using the fuse box panel inside the FJ or under the hood, and I opted to do it on the inside of the cab, but where I ended up having to mount it did create a little bit of an issue with the length of some of my wires that needed to get routed to the engine. So again, I had to do some adaptations to make it all work, but at the end of the day it worked, and it was fantastic. With the help of friends, it's amazing what you can do. Last was paint. Again, it already had a nice lift with nice wheels and tires on it, just black steel wheels, but to complete the look, it needed paint. So another buddy of mine, he'd done some automotive painting. It was the first time I've ever assisted in a paint job, but we stripped all the paint off the exterior, got it all in primer, then painted it. We didn't clear it or anything. I wasn't that into it. I just kind of wanted to get it done. Plus, I knew I was going to go play. I wanted to take it off road. I wanted to go enjoy it for what it was. I didn't want to worry too much about the paint, but I did want it to look nice. So we got it painted, and then when I reassembled everything on the exterior, everything was new. Emblems, lighting, I had windshield hooks on the hood for when you lay the windshield flat down, brand new grille, brand new mesh, headlight surrounds, blinkers, running lights, everything. Everything was really brand new, just right out of the packaging. It was great. Everything shined, everything was polished and pretty. And yeah, it was just a beautiful rig once it got put back together. So after it was running and driving and back together and really in good shape, I took it over to my buddy's house who helped me paint it. And he's kind of a fabricator, he's a woodworker, welder, and all those things. And he helped me build some, like a spare tire carrier for the back of it, and a basket that kind of went next to the spare tire on the back tailgate, so that I could carry a cooler, some gas cans, water jugs, whatever I needed to. It was kind of this basket that sat next to the spare. And that was a fantastic addition. Obviously not a factory looking deal. It made it look kind of aftermarket, but it was sort of the look I wanted. I was going for that off-road safari style. Behind the back seat, I did build a lockable wooden box that, in hindsight, right, it's wood. Anybody can just pry it open or break it or whatever. It wasn't a hard locking plastic. But it was a wood box that, it was custom fit at the angle behind the back seat. And so, all you saw when you looked in there was just the top. And I put the latches and the hinges kind of on the front and the back. So you couldn't really see what it was unless you really looked, or the front seat flipped forward or whatever, or the back seat flipped forward. But nonetheless, I created that box, and in there I had, flashlights and flares and first aid kits and, anything else, tow straps and things like that, that you might need. So, yeah, as time went on with that project, I really found little things here and there. I added, a fire extinguisher later on, and padding on the bars, on the roll cage. And I never did end up doing the family roll cage that I wanted, the one that would go over the driver's head and come down in the corners by the windshield and all that stuff. I never got to that. Had I kept it longer, I think I would have, but I just kept the factory roll bars in the back. and that worked out really, really well. Never did restore the hardtop. And thinking back, my buddy who painted it, we didn't think that far ahead, to be totally honest. The rig was running and driving by that point. I really just wanted to get it painted so I could take it out in the woods and enjoy it. And the hardtop was kind of just stacked in the corner of my garage. I had, if you think about how those tops are, they had a left side and a right side, they had the back door, and then they had the fiberglass top. So they were really simple, but all the gaskets in every window needed to be replaced. The latch on the back fold-up door needed to be replaced. The hinges were kind of rusting out. And then of course the fiberglass top, which my buddy did help me fix with those cracks and things, just again, never got painted. So what ended up happening was we had my daughter and life progressed, and it a couple times broke down on me. One time it was just out of gas and my fuel gauge was off, it wasn't reading correctly, I ran out of gas, and that is what it is. That doesn't happen all the time. That was a one-time thing. I very quickly learned what happened and understood what happened and why. That was an easy fix. Another time, I don't remember exactly the circumstance, but I was at the grocery store and it wouldn't start, and I ended up having my wife come, we jumped it and it worked, but the battery wasn't dead, and so it was kind of a starter issue, I think. And then another time, it broke down again, right? So just 2 or 3 or 4 times, it broke down for random reasons, and my wife got to the point where she didn't want to ride with me anymore anywhere, whether it was to the grocery store or to the gas station or out in the woods or whatever, anywhere. She just didn't want to ride in it. She didn't trust it. And so I was using it to commute to and from work, and I did have a couple opportunities to take it out in the mud and have a great time with it. But ultimately, it just didn't suit the lifestyle of my family. And it was an extra car, but it was taking up space without the hardtop ready to go. As I've said in prior videos, here in Central Oregon, we get snow. So it had to sit in the garage, which then forced one of our daily drivers outside. So, again, it just kind of worked out to be one of those projects that was a blast to own while I owned it. I was really sad to see it go, but I made a bunch of money on it. I paid about $2,500 for it. I think I was into it another $4,000. That's a lot more than I probably intended at the time. Again, this was like 12 years ago, almost 14 years ago now. And I think that the way that works, really, in hindsight, was I bought so many new parts because I was so excited about this build. And, I just kind of exceeded, I had the cash to do it, but I kind of exceeded in my mind what my budget would be. And so I think at the end of it, I was into the truck somewhere between $6,000 and $7,000. I tried to sell it for 10, had 2 or 3 tire kickers, and they'd nitpick. They'd say, well, it's got a Chevy motor in it, that devalues it. Oh, it's got an aftermarket lift, that devalues it. Oh, the paint's not perfect, right? It's fresh, but not perfect, so that devalues it. The top isn't complete. Yeah, it's there, but I have to paint it now to match, and I have to do all the gasket work and fix it and this, that, and the other. That devalues it. So after 2 or 3 or 4 of those, I did have a guy come and offer me $8,500 cash, and I said, you know what, fine, let's do it. So I made a couple grand on it. It did go away, which again, I'm sad about. And I think if I were to look back over the project cars I've had over the years, that's one of the ones that I kicked myself. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't sold it. I wish I had space to just store it and fix the little things here and there that needed to be done, fix the hard top, and then enjoy it. And now I've got 2 kids that are, out of car seats and out of booster seats, and they'd love nothing more than to jump in the back of that thing and go out in the woods and, play in the mud. And so I do kind of miss that that's not an opportunity in my life right now. I can still do that with my pickup, but it's certainly not the same thing. So in trying to replicate that, I've had a couple of Jeep Wranglers. I've had 2 Jeep Wranglers that, again, were fun during their period of time. One was a manual, one was an automatic. And, one didn't have doors, one didn't have a top, one did. All those things. And they've come and gone, and I always kind of joke with my kids that the next toy needs to be like a 4-door Jeep that we can go out and play in and enjoy. I don't know that that'll ever happen. I still look at FJ40s. I'd love to have another one. But I think through my searching over the years, where my heart has really led me is to finding a first-gen Bronco. There's one thing about me you guys haven't figured out yet. I'm surprised. I'm a Ford guy. I've got Mustangs, I've got Raptor, I've got other things that have come and gone that have all been Fords, and or primarily Fords, and they're my favorite. I love them. They're the 60s and early 70s Broncos share a lot of similarities with the Mustangs, and they're complete opposites, but a lot of interchangeable parts, a lot of overlay as far as the design and things like that, if you get into the details. And so to me, that seems like an ideal project, because I feel like I have the experience with Fords anyway, that that would be something very, very fun. At the end of the day, it's something I'd absolutely love to hang on to, and that would satisfy my need for that convertible off-road 4x4 toy that is also appreciating in value. The FJ40 that I sold back in the day for $8,500 today, absolutely without a doubt in my mind, wouldn't sell for less than $20,000. I'd probably have listed it at 25 or 30, knowing that someone's gonna come and nitpick and lowball me, and that's fine. That's what the market for those things has done over the last decade or more. Ford Broncos are no different. I could have bought a Bronco at that same time and probably paid $4,000 or $5,000 for it. It was gonna be more than the FJ, but that's okay, right? I mean, they've appreciated more too. And so a nicely done Bronco from the first generation, $40,000 to $50,000 today. And if you find one under 25, it needs everything. So, the value of those things has just continued to climb. I don't foresee that stopping. It'll get to the point where people aren't willing to spend $100 grand on an off-road toy, regardless of how nice it is. But until that point, I think they're going to continue to appreciate. And so finding one for a reasonable value is just really hard to do right now. And I look regularly. There's a lot of cars that I have on repeat when I'm browsing, and FJ40s and first-gen Broncos are two of those. And so I don't know if I'll ever get another FJ. I don't know if I'll ever get a first-gen Bronco. They're both kind of on the wish list. I don't really need them both, so I feel like if I could find a Bronco, I'd lean that way. But would love to own another FJ because the memories there were just so fantastic. I think that as far as overall toy versus investment approach, right? I built that to be more of a toy. I wanted to make money on it. I wanted to make it nice enough that the next guy would see the value and would be willing to pay my asking price. But at the same time, I didn't want to do anything so high-end that I'd be afraid to break it. I didn't want to, do that frame-off restoration, nut and bolt, perfect everything, professionally bodyworked and painted and all that jazz, especially with my intentions of taking it off-road. If I were to do one again today, I would probably find one that had factory height suspension, factory size tires, factory engine, transmission, all those things, because those add value. The aftermarket lift, wheels and tires, interior being completely customized. It made for a really beautiful rig, but it wasn't original in any sense other than the actual body. And that can devalue it. When you're looking at first-gen Broncos, for example, a lot of times you're going to find them that have cut rear fenders, and from the factory, that wasn't the case. They actually were a much lower fender, giving you less clearance on the back tire. Almost a tucked approach, as opposed to the bigger, beefier off-road style that people use today on those Gen Broncos. So, again, it's kind of picking and choosing your flavor for resale value. I don't know that it makes a huge difference. So for either one of those rigs, I'd kind of say build it the way you want it, build it the way you think you'd enjoy it, and don't hold back. I would go into it, lean in, do it exactly as you want to. And if you want big off-road mud tires, do it. The next guy's gonna love it. It might take you a minute longer to sell it, might not. You might find your buyer faster than that guy who's looking for that frame-off restoration. So, just a couple of ideas for you guys. That is one rig that I do miss. It is one that I'd love to have again, but I'm always keeping my eyes open and looking for the next thing, and I haven't found it yet. So in the meantime, I'm going to continue to revisit old projects. I'm going to continue to talk about a few other things outside the next project idea. But more than that, anytime you guys have questions or concerns, please comment down below. If there's a topic you'd like for me to discuss it in length, whether it be a specific vehicle, whether it be, how do you make money on something, how do you invest, how do you do any of those things, I'm happy to just chat with you. Comment down below or shoot me an email. Please like and subscribe, and as always, may every investment you make be a good one.